We're going to continue in Matthew chapter 5. So if you want to open up, we ended in verse 20 last week. So we're going to start there in verse 21. All right. So we set up last week, Kyle Wiegold watched my sermon last week, and he said, "How many pages was that?" And I said, 9. And he said, "I could tell." He said, "A little long, wasn't it?" And I said, "I didn't feel too bad." This week's only 4 or 5 pages, so you can get to lunch on time today. But it was a setup last week. The next 4 ones depended on understanding last week fully. This not coming to destroy the law, but coming to fulfill it. Right? So not one dot, not one squiggle will change. I'm not changing what's in there. I'm fulfilling it. We're going to see it come to its fullness. This is this statement at the very end, right? Instead, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the most religious people that are around you, then you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. This is the last charge. And that's sort of this, if you can live in this paradox of that sounds impossible, you're getting there, right? You're almost there. If you're understanding that sounds impossible, we're getting close. So now this Sermon on the Mount gets into the nitty-gritty of life. And we're going to get these statements. You've heard it said, but I tell you. And so you've heard the law, the Torah, you've heard it say this, but now I tell you, all connected to relationships that we have with one another. And so it sets a precedence. It shows this sort of high status that God puts on relationships. And God is by nature relational, right? God is who God is based on the relationship between the idea of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, this sort of relationship between these 3 indistinguishable but distinguishable things. There's a nature of relationship that occurs that makes God God. And since we are made in that image, thinking back to what we talked about in Genesis, then we too are relational. And so God's concerned with those relationships that we have with one another. Does this make sense? Why this seems to be very important. So Jesus starts by addressing our relationships with one another and the dangers of unreconciled relationships, right? The harboring of bitterness and lashing out against others, this unwillingness to resolve a brokenness between 2 people. And so this damages that ability to live in that image, which in turn be ministers to Christ and the reconciliation message. This is what we're going to get into. So Matthew 5:21. You have heard it said to people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders is subject to judgment." Let's notice here what Jesus is doing. We're going to go back to last week so we can do this every week together. He didn't come to destroy the law, right? Not one dot, not one squiggle, because he's not giving us the antithesis to that statement, right? What would be the antithesis to "you shall not murder"? You shall murder, right? He's not giving us this antithesis, right? He's not saying you shall murder. He's giving us an expression of that law, right? This is what it means to be that. So let me get straight to the heart of it. This is what he's getting at. Let me expand on it. Let me deepen your understanding. 5:22. So it will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raka," is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fires of hell. So he establishes himself as an authority in the Scriptures. Did you catch it? This is establishment in there. Because he doesn't say the old prophets stand by. Like if you read old prophets, there's an old standby phrase the prophets say, and they say, "Thus saith the Lord." Everyone just say, "Thus saith the Lord." Right? The prophets are like, "Look, I'm not the one telling you to do this. He's telling you. You with me? Thus saith the Lord. Do this, thus saith the Lord." But Jesus says, I say. Did you hear that? You've heard it said, "But I tell you." But I tell you. Not, "I'll tell you this, thus says God." But I tell you. I say. Right? Jesus basically says, you were thinking, "Oh good, I'm not a killer. But let me show you the heart behind the problem here. Let me tell you, I'm going to give you what's really behind it. Not what is there, but the meaning. And I'll tell you it as an authority." So some of you, anyone ever reading anyone in here reading the King James Version by chance? The New King James? Okay, congratulations, thank you. There's an oddity in this that I wanted to get in there. The King James has an insertion into the original text that came in about the 2nd century, and it's this little phrase. I'll read it and I'll insert the phrase here. It says, But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister without cause. Isn't that a nice little addition in there? There's a little without cause. I think a lot of us might appreciate that little two words being in there, right? It's good to know because anyone I'm mad at obviously deserved it, right? Anyone who's mad at a brother says without cause, like if they did something wrong, that's fine. This is what the King James has in there. But would that make you more comfortable? Anyone who hates a brother or sister, blah 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 blah. That's hard. Anyone who does that without cause, does that seem easier? Much easier to say, like, I can be nice to people who are nice to me, but I have a righteous anger against people who have justly hurt me. That makes it more bearable for us. And that shows how uncomfortable we get and how much we look for outs. Right? It's a lot easier if our out is, well, they were really mean to me, so I'm allowed to be mean to them. We like having outs. Outs are easy for us. But the oldest and most reliable and multiplicative manuscripts of the Bible that the Bible's based on doesn't have this without cause in there. It seems to be a very late addition. So there's not an out to cling to that gives us the right to hold a resentment against somebody else. It doesn't say, who is angry with them as long as whatever. Just anyone who is angry with a brother or sister, period, will be subject. Do you see there's suddenly that... Remember that sounds impossible? Good, you're almost there, right? That sounds really hard. You can never be mad with anyone? There's a danger in trying to justify anger, especially within church history. It used to be called the holy hatred. Everyone, give me a holy hatred. Ooh, man. Church history is fraught with the holy hatred, even still today. Christianity has received a sort of black eye for its misuse of justifying hatred to those that we felt were outside of the realm of the kingdom. Let's go 2 or 3 weeks back to the Beatitudes, okay? Is there anybody outside of the kingdom? No, good. We're participatory today. We'll try that again. Is there anyone outside of the kingdom? Good. Anger is a natural human emotion. Everyone say this. Anger is a natural human emotion. He doesn't say, listen very carefully, he doesn't say, you shall not ever be angry. You with me? He doesn't say, don't ever be angry, right? That's the other extreme. Okay, that's the opposite extreme. You can be always angry, or you can absolutely never be angry. Those are both super extremes. Are you with me? This is super disparate extremes. You can't not be angry forever. There are too many things that should make us angry. Look, Jesus got angry, okay? In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they have a story of him walking into the temple and flipping tables over, and John gives us a little extra sentence in there that he says he grabbed a whip of cords and he drove them out by whipping in their direction. He got angry, okay? It's part of being a human. You can't have a human experience without having anger ever. Anyone here never been mad before? Put your hand down, AJ. No, he's just stretching. Right? It's part of the human experience. It's what comes with experiencing humanity. There's things that make you mad. Jesus got mad. He got angry. There was anger, right? Anger can be a motivating force towards real change, right? Jesus is concerned about how we utilize the anger we have. This is what this passage is driving at. How do we use the anger that bubbles up? But we can't take that and soften this blow and say, well, I have a good reason to hold on to my bitterness. You can't also take the sentimental approach and say you can't be angry if you're a follower of Jesus. This is a paradox. Are you with me? Lots of this is going to be hard. Jesus is a really good teacher. He's maybe the best. I don't know. And so many of his things toe a beautiful line of that sounds impossible or doesn't make exactly. You gotta follow him all the way to the very end. We'll go all the way back to my parable of the Pharisee and tax collector. right? And he sets up an impossible question to answer. Do you remember this? Who are you? And if you say, well, obviously I'm the tax collector, you're really the Pharisee because you just compared yourself. There's no right answer. This is how he teaches. He boxes you into a corner and provides outs that seem impossible. We're going to get all the way through this. He uses extreme pictures. He says you'll be liable to judgment. Whoever insults a brother or sister will be liable to counsel. Whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the fires. That is extreme. That is extreme. Every one of us is worthy of absolutely everything we get, because there's not a person in this room who hasn't said something stupid at some point in their entire life. If my daughter was in here, she would go, Dad just said stupid. Right? We've all done it. So there's these extreme pictures. Why would he say fire for those of us who call someone a fool? I probably did that yesterday in the middle of the play happening backstage. I probably was like, you fool, right? To someone. If you were driving here today, I don't know if there's something in the water recently in Columbia City, but there have been horrific drivers driving around this town in the last week. And I don't know if it's because I'm tired and frustrated, but I seem to be caught behind every blue hair that exists in this entire city the last couple days. And I probably have said you fool. Maybe even worse words, I'm not sure. He's showing us the extremes of judgment, right? The judgments are very real. But the reason the judgment is there is because of a deep commitment to relationships, to right relationships. As a society, we enjoy when people get what's coming to them. You with me? We really love those stories. Okay. I was like, is there a spider behind me? That's we really love the stories where people get exactly what was coming to them. We enjoy it. We consume media that's full of it. Think of movies about where someone finally sets the record straight. They're everywhere. The one that I think of is John Wick. Anyone ever seen John Wick? Someone breaks into his house, steals a car, and kills his dog, and he goes on. It's Keanu Reeves. It's a horribly violent movie. And he takes vengeance on every person that exists in the entire universe of that movie because of that. And you're like, he's the hero. Kind of, right? But we love those movies where the wrong is righted and the person who did, they get what's coming to them. Think of any movie ever. Boil down the plot, that's probably the plot of that movie. Jesus says that kingdom people, right? What we need to give ourselves to, like our mind, our body, spirit, heart, is over to reconciliation. And that begins with our relationships. So Jesus is establishing something that comes across really hard and so difficult, and all these things seem impossible. But the setup here, right, it's only possible to fulfill them because not only is Jesus the fulfiller of the law, but he's the one who gives the law. So when you cast yourselves in full dependence on the person who fulfills and gives the law, you can get somewhere with it. You can actually fulfill the ministry of reconciliation. There's no stone unturned when Jesus gets into the personal business. So he compares unresolved anger and contempt with others to murder. That also seems kind of extreme, right? I don't think there's no lawyers here today. Good. I don't think I don't think that I would if I cut somebody off in traffic and I gave them the bird. I don't think that me and somebody who annihilated an entire family would stand in front of a judge and the judge would be like, me, you two are identical. You're both just horrible people. You with me? We don't put those together, right? But Jesus here says, if you've done it, it's the same. It's the same. That feels extreme. Because most of us aren't going to go out and commit murder, right? I mean, right? This is making me uncomfortable how quiet a lot of us are right now, right? Right. Okay. Okay. So I was like, we're in a room full of. I'm very scared right now. Karl Barth, who's a theologian, once wrote something very interesting. He says one of the things that's so fascinating is how quickly a society will embrace the possibility of killing when war comes around. Here's a story about in Switzerland. They had a bunch of people who were on death row who had committed treason, and they didn't have enough people to help carry out the execution. So they asked civilians to volunteer for it. And so many civilians turned out to do it, they had to turn people away. Barth noted that one of the most the most fascinating thing is how many people signed up for it, more than they possibly needed just to have that opportunity. It's a real element within the human heart. We hardly make it a month where there isn't a school shooting in America. Jesus compares the hatred to murder, and he's not saying that the attitude of the heart will end in action. He's saying something even more impossible to get around. He says that the attitude of the heart, the unresolved resentment, the harboring and nursing of a grudge against another, already is an action. It's not the danger of becoming something destructive. It is destructive. Did you hear that? It's not like if you're angry, it might be a problem. It could lead to, it is a problem. It is an action. Did you hear that? God doesn't tolerate contempt for a human. This is a core thing I've talked about many times. If anyone has a long conversation with me, I talk about, anyway, there's no contempt, there's no contempt, there's no human, all of them it's special all the way down to the smallest number of people you could possibly imagine. And this is at the heart of what Jesus is getting at. That a human, a person is a gift, it's sacred, it's meant to be loved and cherished, and that is played out in our relationships with one another. It's not about who's willing to go and fulfill an actual violent action, but it's about who is harboring resentment towards them. And Jesus says, I hold you responsible as if you did it, because it's the same. Judgment comes because children of the kingdom must be ones of reconciliation. That you've been given a message of reconciliation. So this is why he speaks such harsh words of judgment about things that don't seem as actually serious, like being angry. Why does this seem so serious? Because it is. It's about protecting relationships with other humans. Anyone who's angry with a brother or sister is subject to that judgment. He doesn't say anyone who's angry without cause. He says whoever, right? All of us will be angry. And to say that there's never a time to be angry is to say you're not human. You can't escape it. It's going to happen. Everyone in here, you're going to be mad at someone. Everyone say, I will be mad at another human. I have been mad at other humans. Great. We're stuck now. We're in the muck. You with me? We're all in it. We're all stepped in it real hard. Phil, that seems like bad news, right? We're all terrible human beings. Congratulations. That's bad news, okay? My preacher professor says, make sure you heap up a lot of bad news sometimes, because then it makes good news make sense. So we're going to get into the good news now. I'm going to say, here comes the good news. Great. Here comes the good news. What Jesus is concerned, what he's getting at is what you do with that anger. What he's saying is whoever continues in anger, whoever makes a decision to hold on to that anger, to nurse it, to refuse to release it, right? Some people take an absolutely disgusting pleasure in harboring bitterness for an endless amount of time. You ever know someone who's like mad at something and it would like happen to them in like 1945 and they're still mad about it? You with me? And completely overtake you, right? It just starts to wear you out and destroy you, right? It says in your anger, don't make it worse. Don't sin it again. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. This isn't something that you nurse. It's something that you have to learn to deal with in a moment. Don't come under the control or the influence of this evil. Jesus knows the great damage that holding on to bitterness towards another will do. And if in a community of faith, if you want to see the kingdom breakthrough, remember he's talking, this is what the kingdom's going to look like. This is how my kingdom people look. This is what it's looked like to follow. If you want to see that break through, then you have to be people that experience Christ, and it starts with reconciling relationships. Our holding on to resentment is due to an unwillingness to release ourselves as being the center of the entire universe. I'm going to say it again. Holding on to anger and resentment is because we're not willing to release ourselves as the center of the universe. Ooh. If I've been offended, and I am the most important thing in the entire world, therefore you don't deserve my forgiveness, because you have hurt me, the center of all that exists. You catch it? Do you hear how that kind of builds up? Jesus says, he brings it right back to the idea of the gospel here. He says, look at the cross, and he says, look at what they did to me and what I was willing to do for you. John records what's the famous final words of Christ on the cross. Father, Forgive them, for they didn't know what they do. The gospel is meant to revolutionize the way that we interact and live with one another. 3 through 26, Matthew. I didn't save my bookmark page, just a second here. 5:23 through 26. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift at the front of the altar. First go and be reconciled with them, then come and offer your gift. Settle your matters quickly with your adversary and who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer and be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the very last penny. He summarizes this section finally with this really incredible statement. When I started this series, I said you could do a sermon on every sentence, every verse, and preach this for like 2 straight years, and it would be whatever. It ends right here, right? See if you caught this. It says basically, your worship of me is unacceptable when your relationships are unresolved with others. Did you catch that? Let's hear it again here. Let's hear it again. Therefore, if you're coming to offer a gift, remember that if your brother or sister has something against you, you leave it, and then you go and reconcile before you come back. This is another extreme picture that we don't get. We get in our cars, we drive here on a Sunday, we do our thingamabob, and then you drive home. Let's go back to this context he's talking about here. The only place that you could offer a sacrifice is Jerusalem. So let's say you didn't live there. So you hop on your camel or your horse or whatever, and your cart, or you walk, I don't know, and you walk and you get all the way to Jerusalem. Imagine, he's giving it, you walked all the way across the country to offer a sacrifice, but you have this broken relationship with someone back in your hometown. Your wife, your husband, your son, your daughter, your mom, your dad, your brother, says, whatever it is, right? You get the idea. So before you can offer it, he says, actually, go back to where you came from. Leave here. You've made the journey pointless. Go all the way home and fix this first. Our service, our relationships towards one another is directly connected to our worship of God. They're not separate. It's not about you and God first, then your relationship to others. Did you see how he sets this up? Remember, the relationship's paramount to understanding God, right? This Trinity, how we interact. He connects them right here. Your relationship with others is a direct reflection of your relationship to God. So Jesus says, look, your worship is going to be out of whack if your relationships are broken and unresolved. And then he says this other crazy thing. He says, we're to resolve issues with enemies, with your accuser, with your adversary. It depends on your translation, right? If there's any unresolved relationships, even outside of your community of faith, outside of your family, outside of your close relationships, they have to be resolved quickly. Settle matters quickly with your adversary. Ooh, man. To hold on to anger and not deal with it immediately, even with people completely disconnected from those immediate contexts, has long-lasting effects. So we read that, right? And we know that sounds right? Doesn't that sound great? It's like, yeah, that sounds great. Sure, I'll forgive everybody, right? Even people who spit on me or whatever, right? It sounds like, we know that sounds right. We know that, wow, that sounds, if everything was like that, it would sound really good, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that just be great if everyone always forgave everybody, and your adversaries, you would pour a pint with one another and you'd clink it and then go whatever? Right? It sounds perfect. But it sounds impossible, right? There's a tremendous amount of truth in it. We hear it, we know that sounds right. The challenge is that we live in a society that actually promotes holding on to resentment. It's an age of individualism, right? The center of my own universe. Much of the bitterness and the resentment that we find in our lives today is driven by that idea. We have an unrealistic expectation about those around us. And when those expectations aren't met, because we're taught to be the center of our universe, we have the right to be angry and disappointed and withhold love. Jesus says, kingdom people actually don't have the right to do any of that. In 2 Corinthians, Paul opens up what the purpose of the church is, right? At the very, very heart of what Jesus is getting at in regards to explaining this deepening understanding of this kingdom ethic, right? How should we live as followers of Christ? And what Paul says here is that from God, who through Christ reconciled himself to us. So God, through Christ, reconciles our relationship with God. Let's go back. Everything ties together. This is so great. Remember, God's here. We think we're here, but we're actually like somewhere over in Cherubusco about how close we could possibly be to that holiness, right? So God uses Jesus as reconciling relationship. So first of all, our responsibility to reconcile broken relationships flows directly from that gospel message. God's willingness to reconcile our broken relationship with Him, His willingness to take that initiative, to be the God to us as humans, willingness to identify with broken humanity, to take that initiative now and forever through His Son Jesus, right? Paul is saying that if you understand the gospel, if you understand that, if indeed Christ has reached into the depths of your own brokenness and saved you and brought you out of death into life, that life and freedom that He brought into you has to be played out in the way you relate to other people. That's the gospel message. Paul goes on to say that he has reconciled himself and given himself to that ministry of reconciliation. What is Jesus doing in Matthew 5? Okay, is he just addressing anger? Is he just saying, like, this is what anger is, don't do it, right? No, right? He's not. He's addressing anger, but revealing a ministry of reconciliation. What does it look like to actually reconcile relationships? He's reconciling himself to a people. The kingdom speaks of a king, right? And what it means to live under the rule of that king. And so Jesus is opening for us, what does it mean to enter into that kingdom in reconciliation? The enemy of the kingdom would love for Christians to keep pretending Matthew 5:21 through 26 doesn't exist, right? Because if God's people really reconciled relationships, we would be an unstoppable force of love and good. It's not natural. Do you remember that? Prime apes don't sip tea and talk about why they don't like each other. They'd pick up a bigger club than the other one. This isn't how it works. It's counterintuitive to forgive those that have hurt you. That's not how the world works. And that forgiveness changes relationships. Remember, we're being formed in Jeremiah 31 people. It's written on our heart. We're being excavated to the core to live counterintuitively to what the world expects. And Jesus begins right here. It begins by providing undeserved forgiveness to everyone. You're going to get angry. I'm going to get angry. What do I do with that anger? Let's pray. God, this morning as we wrap up with our last song here and then pack up and head back out into the world, may we be people of this kingdom of reconciliation, of forgiveness. That God, we're told we are the center of the universe, but God, may we bring other people into our space to see forgiveness as the thing that is the ethos of this kingdom. God, may we be reconciled with the people around us in our lives. May we become an unstoppable force of love and forgiveness to those who the world thinks doesn't deserve it or we have seen as being undeserving. God, soften our hearts and make us a force of love in this world. And all of God's people said, amen. Let's stand and do our last song.